The gate slammed shut behind her. 4 military attack dogs, 85 pounds each, hunger-conditioned and aggression-primed, spread across the concrete pen like a net pulling tight. Commander Brett Hale pressed his face against the chain link and gave the only order he had prepared all morning. "Let her prove it." The lead dog lunged. Lieutenant Ava Cole, 22 years old, no weapon, no armor, no backup, stood exactly where she was. And then she did the one thing nobody in that training yard expected. She knelt down, opened her hands, and let her heart rate drop like a stone into still water. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow it all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. The morning it happened, Commander Brett Hale had already decided how it was going to end. He stood at the edge of the South Training Yard with his arms folded and his jaw set, and that particular expression career officers develop when they have made up their mind about something and are looking for confirmation. He had been at Naval Special Warfare Command for 24 years. He had 2 combat deployments, 3 commendations, and a K9 program that posted the lowest washout rate in SOCOM. He did not believe a 22-year-old female lieutenant from K9 Innovation Division belonged anywhere near his facility. He believed that sending her here was a political gesture. He believed the correct response to political gestures was to let reality do the work. Reality, in this case, was a 25-foot concrete pen and 4 dogs that had not been fed since Tuesday. Petty Officer First Class Dana Cho stood off to his left and kept her face exactly neutral, because she had learned over 14 months that showing anything in front of Hale was the same as handing him a weapon. But her hands were pressed together in front of her stomach, and she was pressing hard enough that her knuckles had gone white. She had filed 2 complaints. Both had disappeared. She had been waiting for a long time for something to change, and she did not know yet if today was that day, or just another day that looked like it might be. Lieutenant Ava Cole came through the outer gate at 0742, with a duffel bag over one shoulder, and her credentials in her right hand, and her dark brown hair loose past her shoulders, because nobody had told her the dress code, and she had not asked. She handed the credentials to the gate officer without looking at him. He looked at them. He looked at her. He picked up the phone. Hale met her halfway across the yard. "Lieutenant Brennan," he said, and then stopped because he had read the name wrong and corrected himself without apology. "Cole, you're early." "I'm on time," Ava said. "You told me 0745. It's 0742. He looked at her for 3 seconds, in the way men look at women they have already decided are not serious. "Naval Special Warfare K9 Oversight. That's what the orders say." "That's what the orders say." "You're 22. "Yes, sir." "I've got boots older than you." Ava looked at him without blinking. "Then I'd like to see what they've been walking on." Something moved across Hale's face. Not quite amusement, not quite respect. Something harder and more careful than either. He turned and gestured toward the kennel block. "I'll show you the facility." Dana Cho fell into step 3 paces behind them and caught Ava's eye for exactly half a second. That half second carried enough information for a full conversation. Something is wrong here. More wrong than the file says. "Be careful." Ava gave the smallest nod. She had already read Dana Cho's 2 buried complaints on the flight down. She already knew. The kennel building hit her with the smell first, and then the sound. Not the sharp, purposeful sounds of working dogs running drills. Something lower. Something that lived underneath the disinfectant and the concrete and the procedural efficiency of a program that posted excellent numbers. She cataloged it without showing she was cataloging it. Hale walked her through the runs, talking without slowing down. 20 dogs in active training, 12 deployed across 3 theaters. We maintain the lowest washout rate in SOCOM, under 6%. How do you keep it that low? Ava asked. Standards on the front end. We don't accept soft animals, and we don't produce them. They passed a run where a young Belgian Malinois paced tight circles. Yellow tag on the gate. ISO 5. 5 days in isolation. Ava stopped walking. That dog's water bowl is empty. Hale kept moving. He's on isolation protocol. Learning that behavior has consequences. What behavior? Redirected aggression during a training evolution. He redirected because he's in pain, Ava said. Or because he's scared. What's the behavioral note say? Hale turned back slowly. Lieutenant, I've been running this program for 12 years. I know, Ava said. That's why I'm here. Another pause. Longer this time. Hale studied her the way you study something you are not sure whether to dismiss or take seriously. Then he turned and kept walking. Ava followed. Dana Cho followed Ava, and for the first time in 14 months, she allowed herself something that felt almost like hope. They reached the end of the kennel row. Hale stopped, turned, and looked at both of them. You want my honest assessment of what a real working K9 program requires? Please, Ava said. Dogs are pack animals. If the handler isn't dominant, the dog will be. In theater, hesitation gets people killed. We don't produce hesitant dogs. We produce animals that understand consequences and respond to command without question. He paused. You may not like the methods. You can't argue with the results. Ava reached into her duffel bag and pulled out a folder. I can argue with 14 dogs euthanized across 3 facilities in 2 years. All of them flagged as behavioral liabilities. All of them documented by your own veterinarian as rehabilitation capable before the override was signed. Hale went very still. Same place I got the medical flags your vet submitted, and you denied in writing within 24 hours each time. Ava opened the folder. Same place I got the handler complaint reports that were buried at the regional command level before they reached NCIS. She looked at him directly. You have a dog in Run 9. German Shepherd, 3 years old, tan and black coat, amber eyes. Shoulder injury with secondary nerve involvement. Your staff recommended full medical evaluation 8 months ago. You denied it. That dog is being assessed for behavioral unsuitability. That dog's name is Ranger, Ava said. I trained him from 14 months old. She closed the folder. And you're about to tell me he's a liability? The silence that followed was absolute. Dana Cho had stopped breathing. 2 handlers at the far end of the kennel row had turned around without being aware they had turned around. Hale's jaw tightened. Who the hell authorized this visit? NCIS, Ava said. Active since Monday morning. She pulled her real credentials from inside her jacket. Not the K9 oversight badge she had handed the gate officer. The other ones. Lieutenant Ava Cole, Naval Special Warfare Command, Federal Investigator, Service Number 441-Delta-Bravo-7. I've been an authorized federal investigator since 0600, Monday. Every file you've touched since then, I have copies. Every email you sent, every conversation inside your admin building where your own security cameras picked up audio. She pocketed the credentials. Commander Strand has copies too. The color left Hale's face in a way that happened fast and did not come back. Now, Ava said, her voice even and quiet and completely without drama. You're going to show me Run 9. And then, you're going to show me everything else. Hale did not move for a long moment. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something closer to the specific fury of a man who has spent 12 years building something and is watching someone half his age put her hand on the foundation and pull. You want to see what real K9 training looks like? He said finally. His voice had gone flat and deliberate. Fine. 1,600 hours. South Training Yard. I run a handler certification exercise every Friday. 4 high-drive dogs. No protective equipment. Handler establishes control through presence alone. It's called the Gauntlet. Been part of this program for 10 years. He looked at her. 0 failures. You think your methods work better than mine? Get in that pen. Show me. Ava looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. What do I get if I do? If you establish control, I give you full cooperation. Every file, every decision, every complaint that was buried. My testimony, on record. And if I don't? Then you file your report under no violations found, and you take your compliance credentials back to wherever they sent you from. He extended his hand. Deal? Dana Cho made a sound in the back of her throat that she immediately swallowed. Ava looked at Hale's hand. She looked at the run where the young Malinois was still pacing. She thought about Ranger in Run 9, with a shoulder injury he had been working through for 8 months, because she had trained him to trust people, and trust was harder to break than bone. She took Hale's hand and shook it. 1,600 hours, she said. South Training Yard. Hale smiled. It was not a good smile. I'll have the dogs ready. He walked away. Left Ava and Dana Cho standing in the kennel corridor with the smell of disinfectant and the low sound of animals push past their limit, and kept there. Dana Cho waited until Hale was out of earshot. Then she looked at Ava and said, very quietly, "Those 4 dogs he's going to use. He's had them in isolation and hunger protocol since Monday." "I know," Ava said. 3 of them have never responded to a handler who wasn't in full protective gear. "I know that too." Dana's voice dropped lower. "One of them is Ranger." Ava looked down the kennel row toward Run 9. A German shepherd with a tan and gold coat and amber eyes was standing at the front of his gate, watching her. Not aggressive, not frightened, just watching, with the steady, patient attention of an animal, waiting to see what kind of human she was going to be this time. She had trained that dog from puppyhood. She knew exactly what he was waiting to find out. She pressed her hand flat against the chain link and held it there. Ranger's nose came forward and touched her palm through the wire. Held. Dana Cho pressed both fists over her mouth to keep the sound inside. 4 hours, Ava said quietly. I need to make a phone call. And then I need to see every medical file Ward has been keeping. He has everything. He's been waiting for someone with authority to walk through that door for 10 months. Then let's not make him wait any longer. Ava pulled her phone and dialed a number she had memorized before she ever drove through the outer gate. It rang twice. Strand, she said when the line connected. It's Cole. I'm in. It's worse than the file says. I need you staged and ready for 1700. Bring the veterinary assessment unit. A pause. Yes, all of it. We're not leaving anything behind this time. She hung up, looked at the 4 hours between now and 1600. Somewhere in the facility, a door opened. Footsteps on concrete. A voice she did not recognize saying something to someone she could not see. The sound of a facility running exactly the way it always ran, with no idea that the ground had already shifted underneath it. Ava picked up her duffel bag. Take me to Ward, she said, and tell me everything Hale told you not to say. Dana Cho straightened her shoulders for the first time in 14 months. That's going to take the whole 4 hours, she said. Good, Ava said. Start talking. Dr. Elias Ward was a man who had been waiting so long to tell the truth that when Ava walked into his examination room and showed him her federal credentials, he did not say a word. He just turned around, unlocked the filing cabinet in the corner, and pulled out a box that had been sitting behind a stack of supply requisitions for 10 months. Everything's in here, he said. Every flag I submitted, every override, every dog I recommended for medical retirement that went back into rotation with Hale's signature on the denial form. He set the box on the table. I kept copies of everything because I knew one day someone was going to walk through that door. I just didn't know if it would be NCIS, or an attorney, or just another compliance reviewer who'd be gone in 3 days. "I'm not going anywhere," Ava said. Ward looked at her for a moment. Then he opened the box. The first file was a Belgian Malinois named Stone, 3 years old. Hale's lead dog, the one he planned to use in the gauntlet that afternoon. Ward had flagged Stone for stress-related behavioral assessment 11 months ago. The flag had been denied in writing within 18 hours. Ward had filed a second flag 6 months later with imaging attached. Same result. Same signature. Same turnaround time that told you exactly how seriously the flag had been read before it was dismissed. "He didn't even look at the imaging," Ward said, his voice careful and controlled in the way that meant it was costing him something to keep it that way. "I know because I was in his office when the denial came through. He was on the phone. He signed it without taking his eyes off the window." Dana Cho had her notebook out. She was writing without looking up. "That's the third documented instance of override without review," she said. "I have 2 more from the first quarter." Ava moved to the next file, then the next. 7 dogs. 7 separate medical flags. 7 denials in Hale's handwriting, each one with a note that said some variation of the same thing. Behavioral assessment ongoing. Operational status maintained. She read each one without showing what she was feeling, because what she was feeling would not help anyone right now. Then she reached Ranger's file. She had expected it to be bad. She had read the summary on the plane and told herself she was prepared for whatever the full file showed. She was not prepared. Ward pulled up the imaging on his display without being asked. "The shoulder injury is the most recent and the most visible," he said. "Surgery, 6 weeks recovery, physical therapy. He'll have a hitch in his gait permanently. He'll run. He'll work." He paused. "That's not what I need you to see." He advanced to the second image, then the third. His voice stayed level and precise and cost him more with every word. "These are stress fractures in his front left foreleg. Healed wrong. Old injury, at minimum 18 months, never treated. This is a partially healed rib fracture. Same age estimate, same conclusion." He moved to the last image. "These marks along the nerve pathway in his right shoulder are consistent with repeated electrical stimulation at voltage above the manufacturer threshold, voltage that causes tissue damage after 3 or 4 applications." He stopped. "We found 9 distinct scar sites." The room was completely quiet. "He's been living with all of this," Ava said, not a question. "Every training session, every deployment simulation, every assessment Hale ran to justify keeping him in rotation." Ward's jaw tightened. "He wasn't uncontrollable, Lieutenant. He was in chronic pain. And when the pain made him flinch at the wrong moment, Hale called it a behavioral defect and escalated the correction." Ava closed the file. She held it closed with both hands flat on the cover and said nothing for 4 seconds. Then she said, "You're going on the record about all of it." "I already started." Ward picked up a digital recorder from the counter. "I've been recording since Corporal Cho called me this morning. Every flag I submitted, every override, every dog I recommended for retirement that got sent back into rotation. All of it." He looked at Ava directly. "I should have gone over Hale's head 8 months ago. I didn't. That's on me." "You went as far as the system let you go," Dana said. "The system was the problem. The system and the man running it, Ward said. There's a difference. Ava's phone buzzed. She checked it. Strand. She answered on the second ring. Tell me you're set up, she said. Stage 2 miles out, Strand said. 2 agents, the vet unit, and an MP detachment standing by. What's the status inside? Worse than the file. Ward has 10 months of documentation. Medical overrides, behavioral flags denied without review, 9 scar sites on my primary asset from electrical correction above protocol threshold. She paused. And I just found something you need to know about before you come through the gate. Say it. There's a secondary financial thread in Ward's files. Transfer documentation. Dogs classified as retired without standard adoption processing. 8 cases across 2 years. The transfer paperwork is signed, but the receiving party documentation is blank. She looked at Ward. He nodded once. Someone's been buying them, Strand. Fully trained military working dogs, sold off the books. Hale's been calling them behavioral liabilities to cover the exit. The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 3 seconds. How solid is the documentation? Ward kept everything, copies of the originals. I'm going to need a warrant amendment. You have until 1700. I'm in the gauntlet at 1600. Another pause, sharper this time. Ava. I made a deal. If I establish control in that pen, he cooperates fully, on record. Everything. You're going in without protective equipment with 4 hunger-conditioned dogs that have been in isolation since Monday. I trained 3 of them, Ava said, and the 4th one pressed his nose into my palm through the chain link an hour ago. He remembers me. Strand's voice went carefully neutral. If this goes wrong, then you have the documentation anyway, and you move forward without the testimony. Ava checked her watch. I need 2 hours with Ward, and then 30 minutes before 1600. Can you hold? I can hold. Ava, come back out of that pen. I will, she said. Keep your team ready. She hung up and turned back to the files. They worked through the box methodically. Ward narrating, Dana logging. Ava reading and asking the precise questions of someone who had been briefed on the summary but needed the substance. An hour in, Dana stopped writing and looked up from her notebook. There's something else, she said. Something that's not in the files because I couldn't put it in writing anywhere Hale might find it. Ward looked at her, then at Ava. Go ahead. 6 weeks ago, Hale had a meeting with someone from outside the facility. Civilian. I didn't get a name. I got partial audio through the admin building wall because the ventilation system in that corridor carries sound. And Hale didn't know that. She set her pen down. They were talking about 3 dogs, by name, by training profile, by estimated market value. The temperature in the room dropped. Market value, Ava said. One of the names they used was Ranger. Ward went still. Ava stood up slowly from the table. When she spoke, her voice was completely even. The meeting 6 weeks ago. Do you know when it was scheduled? A Tuesday, the 14th, I think. I wrote it in my personal log. Ava pulled out her phone, scrolled back, found what she was looking for. The date when Hale had submitted the second behavioral unsuitability flag on Ranger, the one recommending euthanization review by end of month. Tuesday the 14th. He hadn't filed that flag because Ranger was dangerous. He had filed it to create a paper trail that would make a dog disappear without questions. A dog that someone on the outside had already been told was available. Ava looked at Dana. I need everything from your personal log. Every date, every name you caught, every partial conversation. All of it goes to Strand before I walk into that pen. Already written out, Dana said. She pulled a folded envelope from inside her uniform jacket. I've been carrying this for 3 weeks. She set it on the table. Ava picked it up and felt the weight of it. The weight of a woman who had spent 14 months fighting alone, inside a system designed to make lone fighters give up. "You filed 2 complaints," Ava said. "Both buried. Why didn't you leave?" Dana looked at her for a long moment. "Because somebody had to stay." The answer sat in the room like something solid. Ward looked at his filing cabinet, at the box on the table, at the 10 months of documentation that had cost him his professional standing inside the facility, and had not yet cost him everything, but had been moving in that direction. "What happens now?" he asked. "You both go on formal witness record before 1600. Strand will take your statements by phone from her staging position." Ava picked up Dana's envelope and Ward's recorder and put them both in her duffel bag. "When I come out of that pen, Strand comes through the gate, and we finish this." Ward nodded. Then he said quietly, "Ranger, after the surgery, where does he go?" Ava looked at him. "Somewhere good," she said. "That's a promise." She checked her watch. 40 minutes to 1600. She had one phone call left to make. Master Chief Leonard Voss picked up on the first ring. He always picked up on the first ring when it was Ava calling, because he had trained her, and he knew what it meant when she called from an unknown location at an irregular hour. "Tell me," he said.
"I need you here by 1700, she said. "I need you to look a commander in the face and tell him exactly where his methods came from and exactly what they cost." A pause. "How bad is it?" "He's been running your old protocols, Voss. Not a version of them. The original ones. From your lectures." He took notes. The silence on the line was the particular silence of a man absorbing something he had spent 25 years trying to prevent. When Voss spoke again, his voice was steady and very cold. "Send me the address." "Already sent." "Ava, I'm okay. I know you're okay. I'm asking if you're ready." She thought about Ranger pressing his nose against her palm through the chain link. About 9 scar sites on a dog that had been working through chronic pain without flinching because she had trained him to trust people, and trust, once built right, did not break easily. She thought about Dana Cho carrying that envelope for 3 weeks, waiting for someone to show up. "I've been ready for this since the day you assigned me to K9 Innovation," she said. Voss made a sound that was not quite a word. "Don't let them see your hands shake." "My hands don't shake," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why I assigned you." She hung up, put the phone in her jacket, picked up her duffel bag, and looked at Ward and Dana one more time. 30 minutes, she said. "Get Strand on the line. Tell her everything. Leave nothing out." She walked out of the examination room and toward the south training yard and the concrete pen and 4 dogs that had been waiting since Monday for someone to decide they were worth something different than what they had been getting. She did not allow herself to feel what she felt about that until she was alone in the corridor and nobody was watching. Then she felt it for exactly 4 steps. Then she put it somewhere it would not show and kept walking. Master Chief Leonard Voss arrived at 1547 in a rental car he had driven from the airport without stopping. And the first thing he did when he stepped out was look at the compound the way a surgeon looks at a patient before deciding how bad the damage is. He was 68 years old and moved with the careful deliberateness of a man who had learned to conserve what he had left. Silver hair, hearing aid in the left ear, hands that were still steady when steadiness was required. He had written the protocols that Hale had dismantled. He had trained the woman who was about to walk into a concrete pen with 4 hunger-conditioned attack dogs. Both of those facts lived in his face at the same time. Ava met him at the outer gate. "Ward's statements are with Strand," she said, before he could ask. "Dana Cho's log is transmitted. Strand has the warrant amendment, She staged 2 miles out and moving on my signal at 1700.
And you? Voss said.
13 minutes to 1600.
He looked at her for a moment. Tell me about the 4 dogs. Stone is the lead Malinois. 88 pounds. ISO since Monday. High prey drive with residual handler trust damage from 6 months of correction escalation. He'll assess before he commits. If I don't spike his fear response in the first 30 seconds, he'll hesitate. She said it the way she said everything operational. Flat and certain. The way he had taught her. The second Malinois is older, scarred. He follows the lead dog's decision, but he's not fully committed on his own. He can be redirected. She paused. The young one, Colt, has been on ISO with a yellow tag for 5 days. He's running on panic energy. Most unpredictable. Most likely to lunge without full commitment, which means most likely to stop if I hold ground. And Ranger. Ranger knows me. Voss was quiet for a moment. You're betting your life on 14 months of trust training. I'm betting my life on the fact that I trained him right. She looked at Voss directly. You taught me what right looks like. That's what I'm betting on. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he nodded once and said, Let's go. Hale was waiting at the south training yard with 2 handlers and a crowd that had grown since morning. Handlers from adjacent units, a staff sergeant in full protective gear, standing to one side with the expression of a man who had seen the gauntlet go wrong before and did not want to be associated with today's version of it. Dana Cho had positioned herself at the edge of the yard, with both hands at her sides and her face set like someone who had made peace with what was about to happen, because the alternative was worse. Hale looked at Voss, and something shifted in his face. Recognition. Then, recalculation. Master Chief, Hale said, I didn't know you were coming. You wouldn't have, Voss said. Ava called me, not you. She called her mentor. That's touching. Hale's voice carried the easy contempt of someone who had not yet understood that the ground had changed. She'll need it. 4 dogs, no gear, no tools, presence alone. That's the standard. Voss looked at him evenly. I know the standard. I wrote it. The old standard, Hale almost smiled. We've evolved. You've regressed, Voss said. But we'll get to that. The handlers brought the 4 dogs to the far end of the enclosure on heavy leads. Ava watched them from outside the gate. Stone was coiled and vibrating with the specific energy of an animal that had been deliberately wound tight and not allowed release. Colt was pacing sideways, energy with nowhere to go, which made him the one she would have to read fastest. The older Malinois moved low and cautious, and Ranger, at the end of the line, was limping on his right shoulder and scanning the yard in all directions at once until his amber eyes found her and stopped. He stood completely still when he saw her, just stood there and looked. That's not assessment, Dana said quietly, appearing at Ava's shoulder. That's recognition. I know, Ava said. Stay outside the fence, no matter what happens. Ava, no matter what happens. She walked to the gate. Hale raised his voice for the assembled handlers. This is a demonstration of what Gauntlet Protocol requires. Handler establishes control through presence alone. No commands, no tools, no protective equipment. He looked at Ava. Standard time limit is 3 minutes. If the handler cannot establish control in 3 minutes, the exercise is terminated and the result is logged. He paused for effect. Last chance, Lieutenant. Open the gate, Ava said. Hale gestured to the handler nearest the latch. The gate opened. Ava stepped through. The concrete was warm. The gate swung shut behind her with a sound she did not allow herself to track, because tracking it would spike her cortisol, and right now, her cortisol needed to stay exactly where it was. She heard the lock engage. She did not react to it. 4 dogs at the opposite end of the enclosure. 25 feet of distance that was about to become 0. She did not move. She let her breath go slow and even. And she read the 4 animals the way she had been trained to read them. The way she had spent 14 months practicing until it was faster than thinking. Stone's weight was 60% forward, ears pinned, pupils blown, hunt mode, but not fully committed. Colt was bouncing his weight sideways, no clear forward lean, panic without direction. The older Malinois had his ears forward and slightly tilted, head dropped, processing. Ranger was standing 3 feet behind the others, with his weight shifted off his right shoulder, watching her with an intensity that was not aggression and never had been. Hale called from outside the fence. "Release!" The leads dropped. Stone came forward in a low stalk, and Ava let him come. She kept her hands loose at her sides. No fists, no tension anywhere she could control it. Her breath stayed at the rate she had set it. Slow in, slow out. The absence of cortisol was the only weapon she had, and she was going to use it until it worked, or until she was wrong about everything she had ever been taught. Stone stopped 8 feet out. His growl was low and continuous, and she felt it in her chest. She did not react. She held her ground and kept her gaze soft, not locking eyes with any of them, peripheral across all 4, because direct eye contact was a challenge, and she was not here to challenge anyone. Colt lunged from the left, short, sharp, no full commitment. A test. He skittered sideways when she did not move, and the confusion in his body language was immediate and visible. He had expected flight or fight, and gotten neither, and his entire operating system was trying to recalculate. Outside the fence, someone said, "Why isn't she moving?" Hale said, "Give it 30 seconds." Ava knelt, one knee to the concrete, slow and deliberate. She heard someone outside the fence make a sharp sound. She placed her hands palm down on her thighs and turned her head slightly to the right, exposing the side of her neck. Stone's growl faltered. He took 1 step forward, then another. His nose was working hard, processing something his training had not prepared him for. There was no fear in her scent, no adrenaline, no cortisol spike telling him this was prey. Just steady breath and open hands, and a posture that spoke a language older than any command he had ever been taught. He sat down. The sound Hale made from outside the fence was not a word. The older Malinois came in from her left, circled wide, sniffed her shoulder and the back of her hand. Then he lowered himself to the concrete beside Stone with the careful deliberateness of an animal that had just decided the threat he had been expecting was not materializing. Colt paced for another 30 seconds and then dropped into a crouch 3 feet away, watching her with something that might, eventually, become relief. Ranger walked through all of them, slow, limping, favoring his right side, and it cost him something to close the distance, but he did it anyway. He stopped 2 feet from her face, looked at her with those amber eyes. She closed her own eyes and held still, total vulnerability, and heard his claws on the concrete getting closer, and felt the warmth of him, and then the careful press of his nose against her cheekbone. She opened her eyes. Ranger sat down directly in front of her. His tail moved once, stopped, then started again, and did not stop this time. The compound was completely silent. Ava stood slowly. All 4 dogs rose with her. She walked to the gate and looked through the chain link at Brett Hale. "Open it," she said. His hands were shaking when he reached for the key. The lock clicked. The gate swung open. Ava stepped through, and the 4 dogs followed her out and arranged themselves around her feet like she had been their handler for years. Hale stared at her. His face had gone through several things in rapid succession and had arrived at something that looked like a man standing in the wreckage of 12 years of certainty, not knowing yet how to stand there. "That's not possible," he said. "You can't just walk in there and—" "You can't." "Can't what?" Ava's voice was quiet and completely without drama. "Can't demonstrate that dogs respond to communication instead of fear? Can't show that what you've been calling training is controlled trauma?" She looked at Ranger, who had moved to stand against her left leg. "The only thing wrong with these animals is what was done to them." Hale's face flushed. "You got lucky. They were off today. Their conditioning was disrupted by—" "By what?" Ava said. "By someone who knew them? By 3 days of hunger protocol that backfired because even a starving dog can tell the difference between a predator and a person?" She took 1 step closer to him. "You want to tell me what their conditioning was disrupted by, Commander? Because I'll tell you what I saw. I saw 4 dogs that have been trained to expect pain, deciding for 30 seconds that maybe this time was different. That's not luck. That's the method working exactly the way it's supposed to." Hale's jaw tightened. "I have 12 years of operational results." "You have 12 years of compliance built on fear, and fear-based compliance fails the second the environment gets hard enough." She pulled out her phone. "How many of your deployed dogs have redirected aggression toward handlers in the field? How many have been euthanized for behavioral issues that started in this yard? I have every right to run this program the way I see fit." Voss stepped forward. His voice was quiet and carried the specific weight of a man who no longer had anything to protect except the truth. "Dominic, I gave those lectures at Little Creek in 1997. You were in the front row. You took notes." He looked at Hale steadily. "I spent 25 years writing protocols to replace every method I taught in that room because I watched those methods kill 12 dogs over 10 years. Not in combat, in training. Because I was so certain that hardness equaled effectiveness that I could not see I was breaking what I was trying to build." He paused. "You took my old notes and built a program on them, and called it evolution. You're not a monster, Brett. You're just wrong. And I'm standing here because I am 73 years old, and I do not have time left to be polite about it." The silence that followed was the particular silence of something that cannot be unsaid, settling into permanent record. Hale turned away from Voss, looked at the assembled handlers. Most of them were not meeting his eyes. The staff sergeant in the protective gear had taken 3 steps backward without being aware of it. Then Commander Rita Strand walked through the outer gate with 2 NCIS agents and the veterinary assessment team, and the specific forward momentum of someone who had been staged and waiting, and was done waiting. She took in the yard in 15 seconds. 4 dogs settled around Ava. Hale standing rigid at the fence. The assembled handlers. Voss with his hands clasped behind his back and his face set like judgment. She looked at Ava. "Tell me you got it all." "Remote upload to your server at 0100 this morning," Ava said. "Ward's recordings are included. Dana Cho's log is included. 14 months of documentation with timestamps and override signatures." She paused. "And there's a financial thread that goes wider than this facility." Strand's eyes moved to Hale. "We're going to need to see your records. All of them." Hale said, "You'll need a warrant." "Active since 0600 this morning," Strand said. She held it up. "The amendment was filed 2 hours ago, when Lieutenant Cole found the transfer documentation." She handed it to one of the agents and kept walking toward the admin building. "We'll start with the financial accounts." Hale's voice came out strangled. "Those transfers were legitimate operational decisions." Strand stopped walking, but did not turn around. 8 dogs sold to private contractors for amounts ranging from $38,000 to $94,000 each. Listed in your records as behavioral euthanizations is not an operational decision, Commander. It is a federal crime. She looked at him over her shoulder. "Don't move. Don't make a call. Don't touch a single device until I tell you otherwise." She went inside. Hale stood exactly where he was. The handlers were watching him, with the expressions of people who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had just been told they could put it down. Dana Cho had both hands over her mouth. Ward was standing near the clinic door with his arms folded and his face doing something complicated that had taken 10 months to arrive at. And Ranger was standing at Ava's left knee, his tail making that slow, steady sweep that said he had decided joy was allowed again. Ava looked at Hale. "Go sit in the MP vehicle," she said. "Someone will come to you." Hale looked at her for a long moment. 12 years of authority, running up against a 22-year-old woman with federal credentials and 4 dogs at her feet. And nothing in his training had prepared him for the math of that moment. He walked to the vehicle without another word. Dana Cho crossed the yard to where Ava was standing and stopped in front of her and said very quietly, "I've been waiting 14 months for this." "I know," Ava said. "You kept the records. I kept everything. That's why it worked." Ava looked at her. "That's why any of it worked." Strand appeared at the admin building door. Her face had gone to the controlled neutral that meant what was inside was neither small nor simple. She looked at Ava and said 2 words. "Come here." Ava went. The financial directory on Hale's desktop had been labeled Asset Management, Archived. 8 folders, 8 dog names, each one with transfer documentation, behavioral unsuitability assessments, and beneath those, correspondence with private contractors and purchase agreements and wire transfer confirmations. And beneath that, a single email thread with a subject line that stopped Ava cold. The subject line said, "Ranger, available end of month, confirmed behavioral exit." The date on the thread was the same Tuesday Hale had filed the second euthanization flag. Strand watched Ava read it. She said nothing for a moment. Then, "He wasn't filing that flag because the dog was dangerous." "No," Ava said. "He filed it to make him disappear cleanly." She looked at the email, at the buyer's name in the address field, at the price agreed upon for a fully trained military working dog that someone had decided was a liability because he kept flinching during training, and nobody had bothered to ask why. He was going to sell Ranger. Strand said, "I know." Ava closed the laptop. She stood up. She went back outside to where Ranger was still standing at the edge of the yard. Weight shifted off his bad shoulder, amber eyes tracking her across the distance, tail moving in that careful, hopeful rhythm that kept stopping and starting, like he was still not sure the good thing was going to last. She crossed the yard and knelt beside him, and put her hand on his flank, and felt him exhale, slow and deep. The specific release of an animal that had been bracing for impact so long, it had forgotten what the absence felt like. "Nobody's selling you anywhere," she said quietly. "That's over." His tail stopped hesitating. It just kept going. Strand came out of the admin building 20 minutes after she went in, and the expression on her face said the 20 minutes had been enough to confirm everything, and then find something additional that nobody had expected. She crossed the yard to where Ava was standing with Ranger and stopped close enough that the conversation was between them and nobody else. "The financial trail connects to a regional command signature," she said. "Every transfer document, every behavioral exit classification, every purchase agreement.
There's a captain's signature on the approval chain. Captain Owen Rask, Regional K9 Command.
Ava absorbed that without showing it on her face.
How deep? Deep enough that this stops being about Hale the moment we walk into court.
Strand looked at the admin building. He wasn't operating alone. He had cover from above, and he knew it. That's why the handler complaints went nowhere. Rask's office was the burial ground.
Does Rask know we're here?
Not yet. He will within the hour, when Hale's phone goes dark. Strand met her eyes. We need Hale's full cooperation before that happens. Full testimony, on record, naming Rask explicitly. If Hale lawyers up before we get that, Rask has time to build distance. Ava looked at the MP vehicle where Hale was sitting.
Give me 10 minutes with him.
Ava, he's not going to.
Give me 10 minutes,
she said again. Strand held her gaze for a moment. Then she stepped aside. Ava handed Ranger's lead to Dana Cho without a word and walked to the MP vehicle and got in the other side and pulled the door shut and sat in the specific silence of two people who both understood that something was over and were on opposite sides of what came next. Hale looked smaller than he had in the yard. Not physically. Something had gone out of him in the last 40 minutes that had been there so long he probably had not known it was there until it left. You're younger than I thought, he said finally. When I first read the orders, I assumed mid-20s, pushing it.
I'm 22, Ava said.
He laughed once. No humor in it. 22. I've got protocols older than you. You've got violations older than me, too, she said. Doesn't make them smaller. Hale looked out the window at the compound where his program was being systematically processed into evidence. I built this from nothing, he said. When I took command, this facility had a 38% washout rate on dogs that cost the government $80,000 each to source and train. 3 years later, we were the top-producing K9 unit in SOCOM. That's not a small thing.
No, Ava said, it's not. It's just built on the wrong foundation.
You don't know what it takes to keep a program like this alive. Budget cuts every year. Reviews every quarter. They want more output with less money, and they don't care how you get it. His voice went tighter. So you find ways. You make hard calls. You sold government property for personal profit and called the dogs behavioral liabilities to cover the paperwork. The words landed between them like something final. Hale's hands tightened in his lap. He did not answer. The buyer in the Ranger email thread, Ava said. I need a name. Silence. Commander Hale. Rask's signature is already in the transfer documents. That chain goes to court-martial, whether you cooperate or not. The question is whether you go down alone, or whether the testimony you give today determines how far down you go. She waited. A name, all the buyer contacts, the full financial account, and Rask on record in your words before his legal team knows this conversation happened. Hale pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. The gesture of a man who had been carrying something for a long time and had run out of the particular strength it takes to keep carrying it. When he lowered his hands, something in his face had shifted. Not remorse exactly. Something more complicated. The expression of someone who had told himself a story for 12 years and was standing at the moment where the story stopped working. The dogs I sold, he said. Will they come back? We'll find everyone we can, Ava said. Some of them are probably already. We'll find everyone we can, she said again. That's what I can give you. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. His hands were not steady. He unlocked it and navigated to an email folder labeled Equipment Logistics and held it out to her. Everything's in there. Buyers, amounts, dates, the contacts Rask gave me for the private contractors. His personal number is in the thread from February. He paused. The overseas transfer. That was Rask's idea, not mine. I want that on record. Ava took the phone. Who else in your facility knew? Morrison handled transport documentation. He thought they were legitimate retirement transfers. I kept the financial side completely separate. Hale's jaw worked. I didn't want anyone else caught up in it. That's the first decent thing you've said today. His jaw tightened. He looked out the window toward the kennel block, and for a moment something crossed his face that was not calculation or defensiveness, or the careful management of a man trying to negotiate his way to a better outcome. It was something older and simpler, regret that had nowhere useful to go. I stopped seeing them as animals about 2 years in, he said. His voice dropped to something barely above a murmur. Started seeing them as metrics. Numbers in a column that had to stay green. The washout rate, the deployment numbers, the budget justifications. He stopped. I don't know exactly when that happened. I wish I could tell you. Ava looked at him for a moment. Ranger, she said. The shepherd in Run 9. You filed the euthanization flag because a buyer had already agreed to a price. He said nothing, but he did not deny it. He pressed his nose into my palm this afternoon, Ava said. After everything that was done to him in this yard. He still tried. She opened the door. Remember that the next time you tell yourself the metrics were the only thing that mattered. She got out and walked back to Strand and handed her the phone. Rask's contact information is in the February thread. Full buyer list and financial records. He's ready to give testimony before Rask's team gets word. Strand looked at the phone, then at Ava. You've done this before. You trained me to, Ava said. Strand almost smiled. She turned and walked back inside, and within 4 minutes, Ava could hear her voice through the admin building wall. Clear and precise. The voice of someone who had been waiting for the right moment and was not going to waste it now that it had arrived. The next hour moved fast. Ward gave his full recorded testimony to the second NCIS agent in the examination room. 10 months of documentation delivered in the methodical sequence of someone who had organized it in his head long before anyone arrived to hear it. Dana Cho gave hers separately, sitting at a table in the corridor outside Hale's office, her voice steady and her hands flat on the table, reading from the log she had carried in her jacket for 3 weeks. Every date, every partial conversation, every buried complaint, every name. When she finished, the agent looked up from his recorder and said, Petty Officer Cho, you're going on formal federal witness record effective immediately. Dana looked at him. Okay, she said. Then, quieter. Does that mean nobody can touch my career while this is active? Nobody touches anything while this is active, he said. Dana exhaled. It was the exhale of someone who had been holding their breath for 14 months. She pressed both palms flat on the table and breathed out completely and did not speak for a moment. Then she picked up her pen and signed the witness form, and did not let her hand shake while she did it. Outside, Voss found Ava near the kennel block, where the 3 Malinois had been moved to clean runs with fresh water and food. The young one, Colt, was standing at the gate of his run, watching Ava with a tentative attention of an animal trying to decide if trust was something that still existed in the world. Voss stood beside her and said nothing for a moment. You did it, he said finally. We did it, she said. Your protocols, your framework. I just put it in front of 4 dogs and let it work. No, he shook his head. I gave you theory. You gave it practice. There's a difference. Those dogs trusted you because you earned it in 3 minutes, and that is not something you can teach. That's something you either have or you don't. He looked at Colt, still watching Ava from the gate. You have it. You always had it. The agent came out of the admin building and crossed the yard to where Strand was standing. They spoke in low voices. Strand nodded twice. Then she looked at Ava and said, "Rask's legal team made contact with the base commander 6 minutes ago. He's been told an investigation is active, but not the scope." She paused. "We have a window. Testimony is being transmitted now. If we can get Rask into questioning before his team fully understands what we have, the case closes faster and cleaner." "Then close it," Ava said. "Already moving." Strand put her phone to her ear and walked toward the outer gate. Ward appeared at the clinic door. "Lieutenant." His voice had something in it that made Ava turn immediately. "I need you to come look at something. The full imaging on Ranger. There's something in the skeletal scan I didn't show you this morning, because I wanted to be certain before I said it out loud." She was inside the clinic in 15 seconds. Ranger was on the examination table, sedated lightly for the procedure Ward had run while the investigation was unfolding outside. His tan and gold coat rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. His amber eyes tracked her the moment she came through the door, even through the sedation, and his tail moved once against the padded table. Ward pulled up the display. "The shoulder is manageable. Surgery, 6 weeks recovery, physical therapy. He'll have a hitch in his gait. He'll run." He advanced to the next image. "These 9 scar sites I showed you this morning. That's not what I needed you to see." He moved to the final scan, full skeletal. "These marks here," he said, pointing, "along the cranial nerve pathway. This is not from electrical correction. This pattern is consistent with blunt force trauma, repeated over an extended period. Not punishment during training, something else. Something deliberate and sustained." His voice was controlled and even, and cost him more than it had this morning. "Someone hurt this dog on purpose, Lieutenant. Not to correct behavior, not to build drive, for another reason entirely, and it happened more than once." The room was completely silent. Ava looked at the scan. She looked at Ranger. She looked at the evidence of something that went beyond bad training and beyond financial corruption, into territory that was simply cruelty, documented in bone and nerve tissue, carried silently by an animal that had kept showing up and kept trying, because she had spent 14 months teaching him that people were worth believing in. Her throat tightened. She steadied it. "Who had direct handling access to him?" she said, "outside of training rotation." Ward picked up a separate file from the counter. "I pulled the access log when I saw the scan. 3 handlers had unsupervised access in the last year. 2 of them are in the yard right now and cooperating." He opened the file. "The 3rd requested a transfer 8 months ago and was reassigned to another facility under Rask's command." Ava looked at the name. She looked at Ward. "This goes to Strand right now." "I know," he said. "I printed the log when you walked in." She took the file and walked out and crossed the yard and put it in Strand's hands without stopping. Strand read the name. Her face did something careful and controlled. She looked up. "This connects directly to Rask's network," she said. "The transfer was processed through his office." "I know," Ava said. "This just became a much larger case." "I know that too." Ava looked at the outer gate, where the last of the daylight was going flat and gray. "Find them all, Strand. Every dog, every person, all of it." "We will." Strand was already dialing. "Go be with your dog." Ava went back inside. She sat beside the examination table and put her hand on Ranger's flank and felt him exhale the long, slow breath of an animal that had finally, after longer than she could calculate, been allowed to stop waiting for the next thing that was going to hurt. "Nobody's touching you again," she said. "That's a promise." His tail moved, slow,
steady, certain. Outside, Hale was placed in formal custody at 1847. He walked out of the admin building with an MP on each side, and did not look toward the kennel block, and did not look at the handlers standing in uncertain clusters watching him go. He looked at the ground and kept walking. Dana Cho watched him from near the clinic door. She did not say anything. She did not need to. 14 months of silence had already said everything that needed saying. And now the silence was finally a different kind. Voss found her there and stood beside her and said quietly, "You held this together." "I just kept the records," Dana said. "That's everything," Voss said. "That's exactly everything." She looked at him. For the first time all day, her eyes filled. She blinked it back, steady and controlled, the way someone does when they have been holding themselves together for so long that falling apart feels like a luxury they have not yet earned. "Is it over?" she asked. Voss looked at the outer gate where Strand's team was processing the last of the documentation. "This part," he said. "Yes." Dana nodded. She straightened her shoulders. She looked back at the kennel block where Colt was still standing at the gate of his run, watching the yard with those careful, tentative eyes, waiting to see what the world was going to do next. She walked over and sat down on the floor outside his run. She did not say anything. She just sat there, present, asking nothing. After a long moment, Colt's nose came to the gate. Then he lay down, facing her, chin on his paws, eyes going soft. Ava saw it from the clinic doorway and let herself feel what she felt about it for exactly 4 seconds. Then she went back to Ranger and stayed with him until the sedation wore off completely and he was awake and tracking and pressing his nose into her palm with the steady, deliberate certainty of an animal that had made his decision and was not changing it. The case was not finished. The wider investigation would take months. Rask's network would take longer. But Ranger was alive, and the program that had been breaking dogs for 12 years was finished. And the people who had stayed and kept the records and refused to look away were finally, after everything, going to be all right. That was enough for tonight. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The 72 hours that followed moved with the particular momentum of an investigation that had been building pressure for months, and finally found its release. Strand's team processed the facility with methodical precision, working through Hale's records the way archaeologists work through a site they know is going to matter long after they are gone. Financial accounts, contractor correspondence, transfer manifests, email threads that connected a 12-year program director to a regional commander, to a network of private buyers who had been acquiring fully trained military working dogs at a fraction of their actual value and calling it a transaction. Captain Owen Rask resigned before the case reached court-martial. His legal team advised it. The evidence made the advice easy to follow. Hale pleaded guilty to 7 of 12 charges. The sentencing proceeding received national coverage. 7 years at Leavenworth. Dishonorable discharge. Pension forfeited. When the judge read the final count, the courtroom was quiet in the specific way of a room full of people who had been waiting a long time for a particular thing to be said out loud. The third handler, the one who had transferred out of the facility 8 months ago under Rask's approval, was located at a base in North Carolina. When the NCIS agent showed him the skeletal scan, the one with a cranial nerve damage that was not from training, he did not deny it. He sat down very slowly in the chair across from the agent and looked at the floor and said nothing for a long time. What he eventually said was enough to add 4 additional charges to Rask's case and close a loop that Ward had suspected for months but could not prove from medical records alone.
Ward testified for 6 hours over 2 days. Every word on record, every override, every denial, every dog he had flagged and watched go back into rotation on Hale's signature. When it was over, he sat in the corridor outside the hearing room and pressed his hands flat on his knees and breathed for a moment. The NCIS agent, who had taken his initial statement the first night, came and sat beside him and said, "You did the right thing." Ward looked at him and said, "I should have done it 10 months ago." The agent said, "You did it when the system gave you someone to do it to." Ward thought about that for a long time afterward. The recovery operation for the 8 sold dogs ran parallel to the legal proceedings and moved faster than anyone had projected. The first 2 were located in Virginia within the week, at a private security contractor whose records Strand had flagged within 40 minutes of getting Hale's phone. Both dogs were thin and reactive and flinching at hands, but they were alive, and alive meant there was still time. The 3 in Nevada came back in the second week. One of them, a Malinois named Ghost, had to be sedated for 4 hours before Ward could safely assess him. All 5 were transferred to a rehabilitation facility in Colorado that specialized in exactly this kind of damage. The overseas transfer took 11 weeks to trace, and 3 federal agencies and 2 international agreements to resolve. The dog, a 4-year-old Malinois, who had been sold to a private compound owner in Eastern Europe, came home on a Tuesday in February. Ward was at the airport when the transport landed. He did not say anything when they brought the dog off the plane. He just knelt down and let the animal decide what happened next. It took 40 minutes. Then the dog pressed his nose into Ward's palm and held it there, and Ward said, quietly, to nobody in particular, "Okay, let's get started." Ranger's surgery happened 6 days after Hale's arrest. 4 hours. A complication in the 3rd hour, when Ward found the nerve damage was more extensive than the imaging had shown, and he took another 90 minutes because he was patient and skilled and absolutely determined that this particular dog was going to walk out of his operating room whole. Ranger came through. He would have a slight hitch in his right shoulder for the rest of his life. He would run. He would work. He would press his nose into Ava's palm on the morning she came to pick him up from recovery, and hold it there for a long time, tail moving in that steady, unhesitating rhythm that said he had made his decision about her a long time ago and was not revising it. Dana Cho was promoted to Petty Officer Second Class before the case closed. The recommendation came from Strand and was co-signed by Voss, and was approved in less than 48 hours, which was the fastest Dana had ever seen the Navy move on anything. When Ava told her, Dana looked at her for a moment and then said, "That's not why I kept the records." "I know," Ava said. "That's why you deserve it." Dana looked away for a second, then back. "The new Oversight Division. You said you were building it from the ground up, starting next month. I want in." "I was going to ask you," Ava said. "I was waiting until the case closed." "The case isn't closed. It won't be closed for another year, maybe more." "Then consider this your early acceptance." Ava looked at her directly. "I need people who have seen what goes wrong from the inside, people who know what it costs to stay when it would have been easier to leave. That's you, Dana. That's exactly you." Dana straightened her shoulders, the way she had been doing since the night Strand took her witness statement, the way of someone who had been carrying weight alone for so long that standing upright without it required deliberate practice. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I'm in." 6 weeks after the facility was shut down, Ranger was matched with a veteran named Samuel Okafor. 39 years old, retired Army Ranger, lost his left hand to an IED in Afghanistan in 2021. Severe PTSD and survivor's guilt from losing 2 members of his squad in the same blast. His therapist had been recommending a service dog for a year. Samuel had resisted because he did not believe in the specific way that people who have been through the worst kind of loss sometimes stop believing that things could still get better. The matching coordinator at the rehabilitation facility showed him Ranger's file, showed him the medical scans, told him this was a dog that had been through conditions that should have broken him and had come out the other side still trying to trust the next person who walked through the door. Samuel read the file for a long time. Then he said, "All right, I'll meet him." The first meeting happened in a quiet room. Samuel in a chair, hands gripping the armrests. Ranger brought in on a loose lead and then released. The dog crossed the room slowly, favoring his right shoulder, and reached Samuel's chair and looked up at him with those amber eyes that had seen too much and kept looking anyway. Then Ranger put his head on Samuel's knee and stayed there. Samuel broke. The first tears in 3 years came from somewhere deep and unfamiliar, from a place that had been sealed off since the IED had taken his hand and his squad, and his certainty that the world contained things worth trusting. He did not move for a long time. Ranger did not move either. He just stayed there, present and solid and completely without demand. 100 pounds of living proof that broken things could heal if the conditions were right, and someone refused to give up on them. After a while, Samuel's remaining hand came down and rested on Ranger's neck. The handler in the corner quietly stepped back. Some things only need space. "Okay," Samuel said. His voice was rough and quiet, and the most honest thing he had said in 3 years. "Okay, boy, let's try." 4 months later, Ava received a video on her phone. No message, just the video. Samuel on a trail somewhere in Oregon. Ranger running beside him. The hitch in his shoulder matched to the particular rhythm of Samuel's prosthetic. Both of them moving forward at the same pace. Both of them whole, in the specific way that has nothing to do with the absence of damage, and everything to do with the presence of someone who understands it. She watched it twice. Then she sent it to Voss. He called her 3 minutes later. "That's the work," he said. His voice had the tremor in it now, the one that had gotten worse over the past 2 months. The Parkinson's diagnosis had come the same week Hale was sentenced, and the progression was faster than anyone had hoped. He was still sharp, still certain, still Voss. But the disease was taking what it was going to take, and they both knew it, and had stopped pretending otherwise. "How are you feeling?" Ava asked. "Like a man who spent 25 years trying to fix something and watched a 22-year-old finish the job in 48 hours. A pause. "That's not a complaint." "I know. Ava, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "I'm leaving you the Montana property, and the research files, and everything else." His voice was steady, despite the tremor underneath it. "It's already filed with my attorney. You are the legacy of this work, not the protocols, not the legislation. You. I need you to understand that before I can't say it anymore." She held the phone and did not speak for a moment. "Voss. No arguments. I spent 25 years carrying guilt. I am done carrying it. I want you to carry the work. There is a difference." He stopped. Then, quieter. "Make sure they know where it came from. Make sure every handler who goes through the new program understands what the old methods cost. That's all I'm asking." "I'll make sure," she said. "I promise." "Good." A pause that had everything in it. "That's all I needed to hear." The Military Working Dog Welfare and Accountability Act was signed 8 months after the facility was shut down. Mandatory independent veterinary audits. Anonymous handler reporting systems with federal protection. Criminal liability for supervisors who buried documented medical flags. Real accountability, written into federal law, enforceable, and permanent. Ava stood at the signing ceremony in her service dress blues, next to Strand, next to Dana, watching the legislation that had come out of 12 years of a bad program and 10 months of a woman keeping records in her personal log, and 14 months of a veterinarian locking his documentation in a filing cabinet behind the supply requisitions and waiting for someone with authority to walk through the door. Voss was in the front row. He was in a wheelchair now. The progression had been faster than anyone had hoped. His hands shook constantly. His voice carried the tremor that made long periods of speaking difficult. But he was there, and he was present, and when the pen went to paper and the applause started, he pushed himself to his feet with the effort of a man who had decided that this particular moment required him to be upright, regardless of what it cost. He stood for the entire applause. Then he sat down, and he looked at Ava across the room, and he nodded once. She nodded back. After the ceremony, she found him outside. He was looking at the building the way a man looks at something he has seen for the last time and knows it. "You hate this," she said. "I hate that I'm being honored for spending 25 years fixing what I spent 10 years breaking." His voice was quiet. "But I understand why it's necessary. People need to see that the reforms didn't come from theory. They came from failure. From 12 dogs and dozens of handlers trained wrong, and one man who spent the second half of his life trying to deserve the second half of his life." "It wasn't penance anymore," Ava said. "It was legacy." He looked at her. "Same thing sometimes." He reached into his jacket with shaking hands and pulled out the field journal he had been carrying for 40 years. The one with every mistake, every dog, every handler he had sent into the field with methods that eventually cost someone something irreplaceable. He held it out. "I can't take that," she said. "You can, and you will." His voice was firm through the tremor. "Because when I'm gone, someone needs to carry the warning. Someone needs to stand in front of 200 handlers and say, this is where we came from, and this is why we can never go back. That's you, Ava. That is the entire point of you." She took the journal. She felt the weight of it. Not just the pages, everything behind the pages. "I'll make sure it matters," she said. "I know you will." He looked at her for a long moment, with the eyes of a man who had made his peace with what he had done and what he had not done, and what he was leaving behind to make the difference. "That's why I can let go." Master Chief Leonard Voss died 7 months later at his Montana ranch, surrounded by the rescue dogs he had spent 15 years rehabilitating. He was 68 years old. The obituary called him a reformer and a teacher, and a man who spent his life fixing what he had broken. The funeral had full military honors. Ava delivered the eulogy at Arlington and did not allow her voice to shake until the last sentence. And then she allowed it, because some things are supposed to cost you something, and pretending otherwise is its own kind of dishonesty. 1 year after the gate slammed shut behind her in that Virginia Beach compound, Ava stood in the training hall of the new Naval Special Warfare K9 Oversight Facility and looked at 200 handlers who had never been taught the wrong methods and therefore would never have to unlearn them. She was 23 years old. She was the youngest person ever to hold her rank in the division. She did not feel young. She felt like someone who had been carrying something important for a long time and had finally found the right people to help her carry it forward. On the wall behind her were photographs of 14 dogs, names, dates, the ones who had been lost under Hale's program. Below the photographs, a single larger image. Ranger and Samuel on that Oregon trail, both of them running, both of them marked by what had happened to them and healed by what had happened after. Below the photograph, an inscription. This is what victory looks like. Not the absence of scars. The presence of someone who refuses to give up. Ava looked at her handlers. 200 faces, ages 19 to 40. People who had chosen this work and were about to understand what choosing it actually meant. "My name is Lieutenant Ava Cole," she said. Her voice carried across the room with the authority of someone who had earned the right to stand there by kneeling on a concrete floor in front of 4 attack dogs and trusting that 14 months of doing things right would hold. "Welcome to day 1. Before we begin, I need you to understand something about every dog on that wall." She looked at the photographs, at 14 names, at the evidence of what certainty without accountability could do when nobody was watching closely enough. "They were not failures," she said. "They were not liabilities. They were not metrics in a column that had to stay green. They were partners who deserved what every partner deserves. Someone who learned to communicate instead of dominate. Someone who understood that trust is not a luxury. It is the entire foundation. Remove it, and everything built on top of it eventually collapses, no matter how impressive the numbers look from the outside." She paused. Let it land. "You are here to build something different. Something that does not collapse. Something that holds when the pressure is real. Because trust-based communication succeeds precisely because the pressure is real." She looked at each of them in turn. "That is the method. That is the standard. That is the only thing that leaves this building and goes into the field." She stepped back from the podium. "Now," she said, "let's get to work." The training began, and in Colorado, the dogs from Hale's facility learned what hands could feel like when they were not delivering consequences. And in Oregon, Samuel Okafor ran a trail with a German shepherd who had a hitch in his stride and amber eyes, and the absolute settled certainty of an animal that had found his person and was not letting go. And in a filing cabinet at the new oversight facility, Voss's field journal sat beside 14 months of Dana Cho's personal log and 10 months of Elias Ward's documentation. The full record of what it cost when the wrong people were in charge and what it took to change it. The gate that slammed shut behind Ava Cole on a Tuesday morning had been designed to prove she did not belong there. What it proved instead was the only thing that it ever needed proving. The dogs knew who she was before the men did. They had always known. And everything that came after, the legislation, the network dismantled, the dogs recovered, the handlers trained right from the beginning. All of it started the moment she knelt on a concrete floor and opened her hands and trusted that she had built something worth trusting in return. She had. The law said so now. 200 handlers would say so every day for the next 50 years. And Ranger said so every morning when he pressed his nose into Samuel's hand and held it there, tail moving without stopping, certain and steady and completely without doubt. That was the mission. The mission was complete. The promise was kept. Amen.